Alrighto, time to paint these Greaves. Now, these are armor, so they don't look like metal because they have stitching on them. So they're probably some sort of tanned, cured hides. And I'm testing out a base color I mixed up here to see how it looks. I want a slightly different look than to the other leathers pieces. So let's try this out. And again, it's thinned down so you can see some of the primer through it. What this is a mixture of mainly well, two colors, cold gray and desert yellow, because I want this really desaturated tan color. And the desert yellow, it's kind of the right kind of brown, but it has too much warmth in it. I wanted to cool it down a bit. That's why the gray. So let's paint this on. And let's be careful here to see where. So this edge here is part of the greave, but then this is fur spilling out over the greave. That's not painted, but here we get the greave again. This is fur, I'll leave it alone. But this little portion here is the new color. And well, I'm sort of, I'd painted in a really dark shade there before, and I'm kind of ruining that now, but we'll reestablish it later on. And got it spilled a bit too much there. And let's see here, this edge I need to paint over there a bit. Not that anybody's gonna notice, but I like to be a perfectionist when I can. Too much paint on my brush. Anyway, I was talking in a recent video about why there was so much background noise, and I transitioned into talking about the weather. And I realized watching it back, I forgot to explain how these two things belong together. It's because the weather is so hot and humid, I'm leaving a window open to get some air. And that's why you hear the traffic outside and the birds, and listen, there's quite a lot of birds coming out in the warm weather. And all kinds of them. And certain times of day, it's mostly the seagulls that make themselves known. I live on the coast, if you hadn't figured out. But there's other smaller birds too. I'm no expert, so I couldn't tell you what all these different bird calls are. They're just small, pesky birds. Not, as far as I can tell, any angry birds. That was a weird idea, by the way. Making a movie about a mobile game that was popular a couple years ago. I decided not to go see it, or rather, the idea of going to see it never crossed my mind. And it got predictably bad reviews, so I feel justified. So this base coat is a little patchy. Oh, and there was an air bubble there. But we'll let it dry and then come back and paint over it with the second coat. I decided you didn't need to see me applying base coats anymore. You've seen that before, so I put on 2 more coats and got it relatively smooth. Not perfect, but what can you do? So now I'm going to try to shade a little bit, and I have done this by mixing a little bit of dark gray into the base tone because I want cold shadows, and we'll see what we can get here. And this is very thin down, maybe a bit too thin down. But I want to be careful and not overpower the base tone. Yeah, this was really subtle. But that's okay for a first shade. We can go with subtle. I don't mind that at all. Let's see the edges here. That's a little bit darker. Am I in frame? Yeah. I'm doing these edges so I'll get some contrast, because there is some stitching along the edges that I will eventually paint a different color, just like these strings across the greaves I will paint a different color. I'm going to try to get some of this. There's various nicks and dings and cuts actually sculpted into the greaves, and I want to try to get some of this shade color into those so that yeah, this looks pretty dirty and banged up. The good thing is it's drying relatively quickly. I'm gonna go in and just add some more darkness even to certain spots, just to get the contrast. And I want to get these delineation lines here clear, and behind that, and the edge here between the greaves and the other fur. Yeah, that's probably good. Well, we'll see what happens when this dries, and we'll probably go back to the base tone to try to reestablish that. a little bit. But we need to get these lines contrasted here. That was a bit much, but oh, sorry, you couldn't see what I was doing. Some of that out there. Yeah. It looks really, really dirty and beat up now, as I mentioned, but we will fix this. We will reapply the base tone. As part of the next step. And I should probably just stop futzing with this now and cut and come back when I'm ready to do that next step. What do you say? And we're back and working on re-establishing the base color. What I'm doing right now is painting between the lines, so to speak. I'm doing the edges here between, and put a bit more here up top. And being, I noticed quite a lot of the last clip was very nearly out of frame, so I'm trying to be more careful here and show you what I'm doing. At the same time, trying not to paint while I'm looking at the camera's viewfinder, because that leads to mistakes. And I'm painting very small areas. It's difficult to speak at the same time. So I want to focus the highlights. I talk a bit about where the highlights fall. On the knee pads, of course, the highlights are mostly up top and the shade is at the bottom. That's simple enough. On the very lowest portion here, it's the opposite. The shade is sort of underneath the overhang, and the bit that's sticking out here would catch more light. While in between the shin guards, the focal point is the middle portion here, while the sides are going to be more in shadow. So you have to highlight these three different sections three different ways. But with this first just base coating layer, I'm going rather, for example, the dark areas next to these strings, I want to leave a little bit of darkness there, but not too much. And like I said, these cuts here, I want to leave them shaded. And that has to be re-highlighted. Sorry, this is delicate work, and the shade went a bit too far, so here's a slight portion where the calf muscle sort of the Greaves is following the shape of the calf muscle, and which means it needs more of a highlight on top of that and leaving a bit underneath that in shadow, while here again the material curves out, which would leave a shadow underneath here, but I'll highlight this portion. Same thing here, just under the knee pad there will be a slight shadow. And of course, as per usual, this inside portion really shouldn't have much of a highlight. But this is not real, as I said, not really a highlight. It's re-establishing a base tone. Question is whether I will have time in this video. This will be at least a two-parter, this video, and whether we will have time for more than this rebasing is difficult to say. Possibly not. But by now I hope you can see the difference clearly in the colors between this brown and the brown of the belt, for example. Even disregarding the fact that this is glossy and this is still matte, I hope the difference in color comes across. And I'm trying to not have too much darkness in these sections, but it's difficult. And I'm not sure really how much I should leave here. I'm doing this trick that I often do, by the way, of I'm doing several layers of the same color, the same highlight. I did well, again, I did a bit of it on the sides just because it looked too dirty. There was too much of the shade, and I reestablished the base color there a bit, but not too much. I'm putting in a second layer of this base color on the areas that would actually be highlighted more, and I'm trying to reestablish a solid base color here in the places where I mentioned that I want highlights to be. Well, we're almost up to 20 minutes, so probably I'm gonna cut here and for part one and do the actual highlighting in a part two. So assuming I follow that plan, I'm Verthandi signing off.